Breytenbach was part of a collective known as the Sestigers, an influential group of writers and artists who would change the landscape of Afrikaans forever. He was the poet extraordinaire of this group and would later cement his name in history through work that was viewed by many as unsurpassed.
Afrikaans writers were ready to criticize and engaging political affairs, social affairs, and they also dared to write about subjects that were actually completely underrepresented in Afrikaans literature. For instance, Breyten Breytenbach had a very keen interest in Zen Buddhism. Many of his poems contain traces of interest in Eastern philosophy, which was basically completely unknown up to that point. Spent many decades in France and in Europe, and enriched Afrikaans literature with some aspects of modernism, for instance.
Fiery resistance to oppression also landed him in prison for more than 7 years. Some of his most iconic work stems from this period and would alter the direction of his own life forever.
For a generation like that of myself, he brought a sense of understanding about the different approaches to Afrikaans literature, Afrikaans as a language, and that on the one hand there's the history of Afrikaans nationalism and its history of repression, and on the other hand the history of liberation, of freedom, of resistance. And in a certain sense, Breytenbach was the epitome of that. He brought this sense of resistance to Afrikaans literature, but in a way, in a beautiful Afrikaans, and in a sense, that drew people to him.
After his release, he settled in Paris, where he became a tour de force on the intellectual and art scene globally. But he also continued to play an instrumental role in finding a way to bridge that which divided a people.
Played his part in a reconciliation. In the 1980s, he was one of the organizers of the so-called Dakar rally that took place in Senegal and brought together Afrikaner leaders and also ANC leaders for preliminary talks that paved the way eventually for negotiations that led to the full inclusive democracy that we know today.
Breytenbach took his South Africanness to the broader public stage across the world, according to Willemse. He added that even in old age, Breytenbach continued to create and also acted as a cultural conscience of the world.
Quite an important public intellectual in that regard. So we should, I think, value that somebody like that, a South African, on the world stage, and he played a major role in the cultural consciousness of the world. So in that sense, I think Breyten Breytenbach is quite an important and iconic figure for us as South Africans.
SABC News, Cape Town.